Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and today we are taking a look at the Scalebreaker DLC. Specifically in this video, we'll be taking a look at all of the new DLC armor sets, as well as a lot of past armor sets that were either reworked or updated in some way for this DLC. So there's a total of 8 new item sets. That includes 2 new monster helms, and at least 30 reworked item sets. You heard me right, a little bit more than 30 actually. So make sure you stick around and watch the entire video if you want to see all those updates. They're kind of spread all around the patch notes in different sections. But don't worry, I'm pretty sure I found them all and I'll break them down for you next. And as always, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to crush that like button for me. It really helps the channel. Also make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on for lots more updates this week as we break down all the new DLC info here. So let's go ahead and jump into those new item sets first. Starting with our first dungeon, which is the Grave Fane dungeon. We've got Hollow Fang Thirst. This is a light armor set. Spell critical, max magicka, spell critical. And then for the 5-piece here, whenever you critically heal or critically damage a target, spawn a ball of hemoglobin at their location. After 2 seconds, the ball explodes, and you restore about 3,000 magicka, and you apply minor vitality to the group for 9 seconds. So 9 seconds of minor vitality. Not too bad, plus you get the Magicka Restore, so it's nice for sustain. If you have some Magicka classes in your group, that's going to be nice. There is kind of a 2-second delay there, which is not so great. I don't know why you need a 2-second delay to get Minor Vitality. It's not very overpowered. I kind of wish they would just get rid of that, but seems okay for healers. So Drozakar's Claws is the medium armor set. 2-piece physical penetration, 3-piece weapon crit, 4-piece stamina recovery, and then on the 5-piece, for every bleed effect you have on an enemy, you're going to increase your weapon damage by 200 against them. It doesn't say that there is any kind of cooldown or any kind of duration for the weapon damage buff, which is interesting, but it seems like it's only offensive weapon damage. It doesn't sound like this is going to buff your own healing, but it could be nice for werewolf builds and some other niche builds. Then we've got Renaud's Resolve, which is the heavy armor set, 2-piece max health, 3-piece healing taken, 4-piece max health again, and the 5-piece, whenever you deal direct damage, gain a stack of Resolve for 10 seconds. Each stack increases your healing taken by 1% and your physical and spell resistance by 420. You gain 1 stack every 1 second, and you can have 8 stacks. So let's see, 8 stacks, you're going to get 8% healing taken, and then about a little bit over 3,000 physical and spell resistance. So it's a pretty nice defensive set, I would say. If you need those extra resistances and you want the extra healing taken, not bad. Now the monster mask here, I'm pretty excited about this. I don't know if it's going to stay like this actually. 1 piece, you got weapon and spell critical, so you can use it on a stamina or magicka build. And then for the 2-piece bonus here, whenever you deal critical damage, you restore 1,000 magicka or stamina, whichever is higher, and 500 of the other resource with a 5-second cooldown. So you can proc this 1,500 resources every 5 seconds. So that's basically, what, 300 resources per second? And recovery ticks are like every 2 seconds, so that's basically 600 recovery that you'd be getting on your stat sheet total from this set, and it's only a 2-piece monster set that's outperforming things like Amber Plasm, which is a 5-piece set. So this is really strong. So that was our first dungeon. Then the second dungeon we have here, the Lair of Maarselok. You get Zien's Redress as a light armor set. This has magicka recovery, spell damage, max magicka, and for the 5-piece here, your light attacks apply the Eye of Zien for 20 seconds. So it sounds like a debuff. Enemies with this effect take 2% more damage for each damage over time effect placed on them up to 10%. So you can have 5 dot effects and you would get an extra 10% damage on your target. This sounds really strong, honestly, for like a Magicka Dragon Knight build. Those classes that already have a lot of damage over time effects in their kit, even like Necromancers. This is going to be pretty nice damage set. Taking a look at the medium armor set next, we've got weapon critical, max stamina, stamina recovery, and for the 5-piece, when you deal damage over time, You apply a stack of Blight Seed for 5 seconds, and then at 20 stacks, the seed explodes, giving about 11k disease damage. Looks like an AoE effect. And then there is a 2-second cooldown once that procs. So let's think about this. For a stamina class, you might have, let's say maybe 4 or 5 dots ticking every 1 or 2 seconds. So how long would this take to proc? You have to get it to 20 stacks. Maybe 5 seconds, maybe 6 seconds to get this 11k, and I assume this is going to go up a lot with champion points and stuff like that. So it seems like it might have a pretty good amount of damage here. Then Dragon's Defilement is our heavy armor set. Max stamina, max health. I do like that. I like that they've been adding more stamina to the heavy armor stuff. And then the 5-piece, when you take damage from a melee attack, gain a corrupting aura for 5 seconds. Applies minor fracture and minor breach, okay, to all enemies near you. So like an AoE, minor fracture and minor breach, that's pretty cool. And then it can happen every 5 seconds. Okay, I don't know if minor fracture and breach is worth a 5-piece bonus. It looks okay though, not bad. And then the monster mask. Maarselok. You get a 1-piece max stamina. 2 pieces. When you bash an enemy, spew a cone of corruption, dealing 8,000 disease damage. I'm assuming that's AoE too. This damage is increased by 5% for each negative effect the enemies have, up to 150%. Additional damage, 7-second cooldown on that effect. I didn't think they'd go for a bash set. What with the Necromancer and the changes to bash and things like that. But they went there, they did it. So we'll see. We'll see how the balance looks on this when it comes out. Definitely interesting set. Let me know what you guys think about that one. So we're going to jump down to the updated item sets next, starting with the Phoenix set, which is a very old set. It used to be when you died, you had like this burst heal and explosion. But it could happen every 10 minutes, but it was kind of unique because you actually died and then you would get healed up again. So now the new effect. New. When you drop below 25% health, gain a damage shield that absorbs 10,000 damage for 6 seconds and deals 12,500 flame damage to nearby enemies with a 1-minute cooldown. Looking at this, 10,000 damage shield is not super powerful. This seems a little bit weak, honestly, considering that it does have a 1-minute cooldown. Damage proc is nice, though I guess my question would be, is this 10,000 in PvP or is it 5,000? I don't know if this is worth a complete 5-piece set. Interesting change, though. So next we've got Way of Martial Knowledge. Very old set, Craglorn set. When you deal damage, this is the old version. The enemy would take 10% additional damage for 2 seconds. So new. When your stamina is below 75%, your light attacks cause the enemy to take 10% additional damage for 4 seconds. 6 seconds. It can happen every 6 seconds. So very interesting change here. When your stamina is below 75%, in PvP at least, this will be pretty consistent. This will be pretty easy to proc. What is that, like 1 dodge roll maybe of your stamina pool, maybe 2? You can proc that, and then just hit him with a light attack to get 10% additional damage for 4 seconds. Wow, I like this. I'm definitely going to try this on a Magicka Sorcerer. This sounds really ridiculously strong. Just imagine doing a dodge roll, quick light attack, maybe to proc a Berserker Glyph, and then just have all your burst hit within that 4 seconds. This sounds pretty good, pretty strong for PvP for sure. Elemental Succession. This used to give a rotating bonus to flame, shock, or frost damage. 515 spell damage. So now the new version, whenever you deal flame, shock, or frost, you gain 500 spell damage for that element for 4 seconds. This effect can occur every 8 seconds per element, and you can have multiple different buffs. That is a hefty cooldown though. So you have the buff up for 4 seconds and then there's 8 seconds. So up for 4, down for 4 basically. But I guess the idea is that you would rotate like a shock attack and then a flame attack and a frost attack. Sounds pretty challenging actually to make this work. Also sets like Spell Strategist, for example, already give you like 500 spell damage to every effect consistently 100% of the time. So why would you run this over like Spell Strategist, for example? I don't know. Doesn't seem that's great. I might pass on that one. Okay, Overwhelming Surge. This change was interesting, and you guys let me know if you think this is a nerf or a buff. I'll tell you what I think in a minute. So the old ability, 15% chance, 1892 shock damage, 6 second uptime basically. New version, when you deal damage with a class ability, you now have a 33% chance for the effect. So the percent chance went up, it doubled basically. But the effect is now 1000 shock damage. Now what this sounds like is it sounds like it's AoE now. It used to be single target. Because if you look here, 1892 shock damage to the closest enemy within 12 meters. Now it's 1040 shock damage to enemies within 12 meters every 1 second for 6 seconds. So it's kind of like the Thunderbug set, it seems like, where it has this pulse of shock damage. They definitely lowered the damage quite a bit. It's almost half the damage of what it used to be. But now it seems like it's an AoE effect. Proc chance is higher. And you also have this 15% of the damage you deal is restored to you as magicka, which is pretty nice for sustain. So this is an interesting change. Overwhelming Surge got a big change. Let me know what you guys think of that one, if you think that's a buff or a nerf as far as that one goes. Trinamax Valor, this is another pretty old set. It's from the Orsinium DLC, I believe. Used to be cast a damage shield on an ally. You have a 20% chance to call down a fragment that heals you and your allies. 3k health, 3k magic damage with a 5-second cooldown. New version, same proc effect here. When you cast a damage shield ability, but there's no chance here. So instead of 20% chance, it seems to be every time you cast a damage shield, so that's good. It's going to proc a lot more often. This 20% was really low. And now it heals you and your allies for 4,000 health and does 4,000 magic damage with the 5-second cooldown. So I like what they're trying to do here. I've tried to use this set before on a Magicka Dragon Knight healer build. Just didn't work for me because the healing was so small. This is not a lot of healing, especially in PvP. So they didn't really change that. They just made it proc more often. I don't think 4,000 health is enough to justify every 5 seconds. That's very little when you consider it can only happen every 5 seconds. I don't know, but it might be okay since it procs 100% of the time now. We'll see. I'll definitely try it out. We've got the Stench's Bite. This is the roll dodge set. So when you did the roll dodge, you had weapon damage increase of 430 plus a little bit of extra weapon critical. Was a pretty nice PvP set. Now, new, when you use roll dodge, increase your critical damage by 12% for 8 seconds. This is really interesting. I'm not sure what is better. What do you guys think? Is 430 weapon damage better, or is 12% critical damage better? This will still be really nice on like a Wood Elf, Nightblade, or a Wood Elf Stamina Templar, because those classes already get critical damage bonuses. And you'll get 12% more. That's like the Shadow Mundus Stone level of crit damage. That's basically like an extra Shadow Mundus every time you roll dodge. So it's pretty strong. I also like here that instead of 5 seconds for the proc, which was really short, it's now 8 seconds. So that's very nice. Kind's Kiss, this is the old bow set. When you dealt direct damage with a bow ability, you had a 10% chance to heal for 1216 health and restore 1216 stamina. New. When you deal direct damage while 12 meters or more, you now have a 15% chance to heal 1,000 and restore 1,000 stamina. So the proc chance went up, but the restore went down a little bit. Still doesn't seem like very much, but I guess because there's no cooldown on this, it could be good for sustain. Do bow builds really need that much sustain though? I don't know. Heavy armor is next. Eternal Warrior. The old effect, this is another when you die effect. You used to turn into a statue, gain 200 ultimate. You were immune to all negative effects. You could still be healed, and it had a 10-minute cooldown, which is pretty massive. New. When you drop below 25% health, you heal for 1250 health and gain 100 ultimate. The effect can occur every 1 minute. I kind of like this change. I like this more than the Phoenix change that they tried to pull off because the 100 ultimate here is very nice. Imagine in PvP you have your ultimate, drop your Dawnbreaker or some nice like expensive ultimate, and then let's say your health drops down, you get that big burst heal and you get 100 ultimate back right away. So you could basically have, back-to-back very powerful ultimates, and you can proc that every 1 minute. So this is going to be pretty interesting, I would say in PvP especially. Definitely check that out. So Immortal Warrior, very similar. You can get the statue for 3 minutes. You were immune to negative effects, but could still be healed. So yeah, pretty bad. Pretty bad previously. New. When your health is below 35%, gain major protection. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. 35%. I like how they raised this up from 25. That's actually useful. Okay, 7th Legion. 7th Legion got a big change. I know some of these heavy armor sets, a lot of people thought these were overperforming, especially in PvP. So let's see what they did here. Old, you had the 10% chance to gain 500 weapon damage and 1260 health with a 2-second cooldown. Definitely very strong. New. When you cast an ability that increases physical or spell resistance, you gain 350 weapon damage and 350 health recovery for 10 seconds with a 10-second cooldown. So quite a different change here. You have 350 weapon damage instead of 500. You also have the 350 health recovery instead of the healing. Now, I do like the health recovery. I think that's nice. The 350 weapon damage seems a little bit on the low side. I get that it is a heavy armor set, but you could just run heavy Hunding's Rage and you get 300 weapon damage for that. And that's up all the time. Because this proc is a little bit challenging on certain builds. So it seems like if you can pull this off with a build, you should be rewarded for it. So to proc it, you have to cast an ability that increases your physical or spell resistance. So I could see this being good on like a Stamina Sorcerer with Hurricane, even Stamina Templar on the Stamina Rune buff, that's 20 seconds, so you'd have to overcast your resistance buff, which takes resources, it takes a global cooldown, but that could be doable for those classes. My other question is, would this work on Stamina Nightblade with the Shadow Barrier passive, where you get the physical and spell resistance buff whenever you use a shadow ability? I wonder if that will proc this because that's a passive, that's not an ability. So that'll be interesting to see. Let me know what you guys think of that one. Nerf or buff? Definitely a very different rework. Now speaking of different, this set got completely changed. Veiled Heritance used to be a very strong weapon damage set. When you deal damage, you had 10% chance to increase your weapon damage by 400 for 5 seconds. Very strong set. Now, when you interrupt an enemy, you gain 500 weapon damage for 5 seconds. The problem with this is that interrupting is just not a very common mechanic in the game. It's more common in PvE, where you have, casters and archers and things that have cast time abilities. Could be useful, I guess, maybe even for like Veteran Maelstrom Arena or something like that. But for PvP, there's very few cast time abilities now. If you go this out for PvP, sorry. Yeah, that doesn't look too good anymore. Now, Ravager also got changed, you guys. They went changes across the board for these heavy armor sets. Ravager used to have the 8% chance to proc 645 weapon damage for 10 seconds. Also a very strong weapon damage set. For the new version, we have each time you attempt to reduce the target's physical or spell resistance, you gain a stack of Ravager for 5 seconds. Increases your weapon damage by 125, and you can gain a stack every 1 second. At 4 stacks, the duration doubles but cannot be refreshed. So 4 stacks of 125 is going to max you out at 500 weapon damage. So it went from 645 to 500 weapon damage. I don't know. I mean, if you had Ravager, it's only going to work on very specialized builds now because look at the proc chance. You have to reduce the target's physical or spell resistance. So this is going to really focus the set onto sword and shield builds because you can do pierce armor. There's other things like a Nightblade could use mark target, I guess. So yeah, very different here. And you also have to work it up. It's basically almost like Fury, but like an offensive version of Fury where you have to build up the stacks. And again, at 4 stacks, the duration will double. So you'll have it active for like 10 seconds, I guess, but then you can't refresh. So it's going to stop and you have to redo your stacks. Can't have it up 100% of the time anymore. So you guys, that's not all. There's actually more item set changes buried further in these massive patch notes. So if you look down through the effects section and look at Oblivion damage specifically, Oblivion damage is getting reworked too, by the way. It's going to be based on the target's max health with a cap on it now. But this does affect a couple of item sets. So the first one was Slodes. So Slodes now deals 3% of the target's max health per tick. And that is going to have a maximum. And then Night Slayer was also affected by the changes to Oblivion damage. So I kind of like this one for PvE builds because this set can now proc on any target, not just players. So it used to be player only, making it PvP only. Now it can proc on enemies as well. This is on a heavy attack. So anytime you heavy attack, you deal 8% of the target's max health. And that is going to be capped at 8,000 Oblivion damage. But that's going to be pretty nice for some PvE builds, maybe some solo builds. You might want to check that out. Now there is even more changes further down, past all the class balance stuff, past all the skill changes, which I'm going to get to in a different video, guys. Don't worry. But under item sets, there are even more changes. Now, some of these are bug fixes. I'm not going to mention the bug fixes because I don't think that's a big deal. Good on them for fixing bugs. But they did do a couple of major reworks to the item sets here. So first one, that's kind of a nerf, I guess, is Eben. Eben got reduced. So reduced the max health bonus from 1,100 to 1,000. Not sure why they felt they need to do that, but they went ahead and did it. A couple more bug fixes. Now this one was interesting to me. Heemja's Retribution. This is the Major Berserk set. So it used to be 3 seconds of Major Berserk. They actually buffed it to 5 seconds. So 5 seconds of Major Berserk, but they made it a little bit more difficult to proc because now it only works on enemies who you're actively in combat with. Now for something like VMA, this sounds very good now because 5 seconds is going to be very high uptime when you're killing enemies every few seconds. You move from one enemy to the next, and you can basically have Major Berserk up 100% of the times when you're engaging with multiple enemies. So this looks strong. I might check that out for some PvE builds. Ice Furnace, this now grants spell damage instead of weapon damage for the 4-piece bonus. That's great. That was a weird bonus for a long time. Merciless Charge got a little bit of a buff here, which is cool. If you want to use that, this is the VMA two-hander. Increase the amount of ticks by 1, resulting in 20% more damage. So I believe it was like a 4-second dot, and now it's probably like 5 seconds. Pillar of Nirn, this also got a slight buff here, increased the bleed damage by 25%, resulting in 20% total damage increase. Okay. Plague Doctor. Plague Doctor got nerfed again. Too many sorcerers using this, maybe? I don't know. They don't give any reason for why it changed, but it did get nerfed quite substantially. Reduced the max health bonus to 3,000, down from 4,000. That's a 25% nerf. Wow. So Savage Werewolf got a buff, a slight buff here that I kind of like. It now ticks once every second for 4 seconds, instead of once every 2 seconds for 6 seconds. That was kind of a slow proc on that. So it does result in 1 additional damage tick, which is going to be nice if you're using that set, maybe on a werewolf build. Sentinel of Rakugamaz, the healer spider monster set, now will always spawn on the target who procced the summon, rather than just on the caster. The spider now doesn't like run away from you, which is good. Stinging Slashes, they increase the damage bonus here, which is good. Thunderous Volley, so you need to know a little bit about the changes to Volley for this to make sense. Basically, one of the things that happened with Volley is instead of ticking every half second, it's now going to tick every 1 second. So basically a damage nerf for that skill. So to compensate, apparently they increased the damage bonus on the Thunderous Volley, which is the VMA bow. So I don't know how that's going to compare to the current version of the VMA bow. Hopefully it's a similar damage output though. So Torag's Pact, this no longer increases Oblivion damage enchants. It does decrease their cooldown though, okay. Twin Sisters, I don't know if anybody actually uses this set, but you might want to check it out because they increase the dot by 67%. Pretty strong buff. I think it's like a 10k bleed already. So that's going to be quite strong. Though it is 10 seconds now instead of 8. So check that out if you're interested. And then Veladreth. Veladreth got a nerf for PvE mostly. So this item set's proc can no longer hit the same monster multiple times. So possibly quite a bit of DPS loss there on those boss encounters for PvE. And then Fury. You didn't think Fury was going to be missed, did you? They threw it way at the end, very end of the patch notes, is Warrior's Fury. So it's an interesting change. This set now procs off taking any damage rather than critical damage. Interesting. So some PvE possibilities for this set now that you can take a look at. They also reduced the duration of the buff to 5 seconds from 6 seconds, okay. The stacking bonus can now only occur once every half second. So a little bit of delay in stacks there. They also reduced the total number of stacks to 20, down from 25, resulting in a total of 150 less weapon damage. Similar to what they did with Ravager there, once you reach the 20 stacks, the bonus stops, but it does double. So you'll get basically a 10-second maxed stacked buff, then it's going to wear off and you have to restack all over again. Which again, very similar to the changes that they put in for the Ravager set. That seems to be the way that they're going with these heavy armor sets now. So that's going to wrap it up, you guys. That's the last set, literally like almost 40 sets, either new or reworked in this patch. Just a crazy amount of changes. Make sure you let us know what you think in the comments section. What do you guys think were the good changes? What were the bad changes? Anything that you're looking forward to? Let's have a discussion here and let's talk about it. As always, if you enjoyed the video today, don't forget to crush that like button for me. And make sure you've got notifications turned on for more videos coming out later this week with all the Scalebreaker DLC info. And until then, I will see you guys around in the next video. Thanks.